Hey folks, Mark here. Now that we've covered the social, asocial, the social violence, and then process predators and resource predators and protection, I'd kind of like to circle back to the asocial social paradigm. One of the things that is really important to understand about social violence is it tends to happen between people who are the same family, tribe, clan, society. And that is their thinking in this context. So basically, even though you may not know somebody, if you're a cop, your job is to enforce the rules of the group. And that's the thing that a lot of the violence that happens boils down to social violence, and it has rules, it has goals, and it has levels of behavior. What is appropriate for that? And that's why, a lot of times social violence is so confusing to people because it's an umbrella term. It's not a specific type of violence. There can be, as I said, dominance display, rule enforcement, hierarchy maintenance, punishment, all these different status, gaining, protecting. All these things are possible, and like reactions to slights, insults, you know, all of this stuff falls under this giant umbrella. And there are many different types. There's also like some of the terms Rory's come up with are like a status seeking show, which is when somebody is doing something to send a message about, how big and bad he is. Also, message violence is a very real thing that, and that can actually turn fatal where somebody will kill somebody not because they're seeking to punish that person, but to send a message to the rest of society. Again, many, many factors involved. Resource, asocial violence, you have protection and you have predation, but things get complicated when you're dealing with other humans. And I mean, really understand that resource violence often is done to somebody that you don't feel is entirely human. And there's othering and dehumanizing, et cetera, et cetera. But more than that, you kill a pig for food. And that's the thing. You kill a coyote to protect your animals. So, there's all these different things, but the lack of humanity is a permission to use higher level of force. And that is one of the things that actually distinguishes it between social violence and this. This can be a lot more dangerous, by the way. And it doesn't always result in death, but it can. And that's because of the higher level of force. Therefore, your response also has to be of an equal level and with as little hesitation as possible. Now, you are trying to negotiate not having to use this. Believe me, it's really important. That's something that happens with social violence and all the threat displays and all that other nonsense. But seeking to find a non-physically violent resolution to potential resource violence, that, yeah, you want to try it. Don't rely on it happening. That is something that, they want their goal, they're going to get that, and if you get in the way, it becomes a problem. Now, something that is really important to understand with deterring asocial resource violence is you can't personalize it. You really have to keep your calm. Peyton's 5+1 rules will not stop it from happening. And that's something Roy and I were discussing, and he pointed out that, Peyton's stuff doesn't work in this regard, and yes, he is right on that. It will not deter it. What it will do, however, is escalate it if you violate those same rules. So, you still need Peyton's 5+1 here, but you're playing a slightly different game. And not antagonizing, not personalizing it as you're seeking to deter resource predation is a really good one. And I mean, when you deal with professionals or violence professionals, they tend to have a very strong strategy of, we're getting attacked by a cat here. Come on. He just didn't take no for an answer. This is Puma, by the way. You'll find that violence professionals tend to be extremely polite to prevent unnecessarily violence. They don't want to antagonize the guy and give him and trigger him to go off. They're not afraid of it going off, but they don't want unnecessary violence. That's a good thing to keep in mind. Now, process predators, they're a booger to deal with. But like I said, thank God they're rare. And they're extremely rare. And this is where there's something I should tell you about that Rory and I disagree on. I love this model, and make no mistake. He did it when he was a county jail guard in Multnomah County. And by the time people get into that environment, they tend to be a little more along the process. Thing is, you don't just open the door, the door just doesn't open and out steps a process predator fully blown and developed. But you'll run into that in prisons and jails a lot, that they are already developed. Outside in the wilds of the world, a lot of times what you'll get is somebody who is in the process of becoming this. Now, how far down that road they are, it really, it's hard to say. Now, in prison, what Rory observed, and I agree that this happens, this is right, because I also ran a correctional center, is you have people who go from social to asocial. They're flipping a switch. That happens, right? Out in the wild, and the analogy that works here is an animal behaves differently in a zoo than they do in the wild. And while I agree about the switch, there's also people who really are not sure what they're doing. So they kind of create an ugly hybrid. And you will run across this hybrid and it's like, what am I dealing with? Because, again, social violence can easily be, or usually be, de-escalated. And in this de-escalation process, there are scripts, there are stages, and once you offer, and this is why I use the road to violence analogy, once you offer somebody an off-ramp, a lot of times they'll take it. So try the off-ramp. Try to offer them the off-ramp. If they don't take it, then either you offered the wrong off-ramp or you're likely to deal with somebody who's leaning towards predation if they aren't already there. And that's a big issue. A lot of asocial process predation is performed under the guise of social scripts. And they pretend to find some reason to be outraged when they're actually just looking to beat somebody up. So, one of the signs is when you offer an off-ramp and the guy doesn't take it, that could be. Now, in another video, I'm going to explain how to tell with process predators when the instructions to avoid violence aren't real. And that's something worth knowing. So when you can see it, you'll know it. But like I said, understanding what you're dealing with will once you can recognize, okay, this is what's on the table here, you'll have a different set of options than you would if this was what was going on. And that's an important skill to have, an important thing to know, and most importantly, important to recognize. Thanks.